My name is Patricia, and at 35 years old, I thought I had everything figured out. Married to a tech billionaire for 12 years, living in a $50 million mansion in Silicon Valley, two beautiful children in private school. Life seemed perfect until something started feeling off about Marcus's fishing trips to Alaska. He'd been going 3 times a year since we met, but recently they'd gotten longer, more secretive. So last month I decided to surprise him. Before I share what changed my life forever, let me know where you're watching from. Please like and subscribe if you've ever trusted someone completely, only to discover you never really knew them at all. Let me paint you a picture of what my life looked like before everything came crashing down. Every morning I'd wake up in our master bedroom that was bigger than most people's apartments. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the bay, and on clear days you could see all the way to the Golden Gate Bridge. Marcus would already be gone, usually at the office by 5:30, running his $3 billion artificial intelligence company that he'd built from nothing. I'd start my day with yoga in our private studio, then wake Emma and Ethan for school. Emma, 10 years old and already showing signs of her father's brilliant mind, would be practicing violin, while Ethan, 8, would be building something elaborate with his engineering blocks. Our housekeeper Maria would have breakfast ready, always something healthy and organic that cost more than most families spend on groceries in a week. The children attended Whitmore Academy, where tuition ran $75,000 per year per child. I'd drive them in my white Tesla Model X, listening to them chatter about their advanced placement classes and upcoming science fairs. After drop-off, my days were filled with charity board meetings, lunch with other tech wives, organizing fundraisers for causes that mattered to me. I ran a foundation for underprivileged youth in East Palo Alto, something that kept me grounded despite our privileged lifestyle. But the truth is, I hadn't always lived like this. 12 years ago, I was Patricia Coleman, financial journalist for the San Francisco Chronicle, making $60,000 a year and sharing a cramped apartment in the Mission District with 2 roommates. I met Marcus at a startup conference I was covering. He was presenting his revolutionary AI algorithm to a room of skeptical investors, and I watched him get rejected by every single one of them. Something about his passion drew me in. After his presentation, I found him sitting alone at the hotel bar, nursing a beer he probably couldn't afford. I introduced myself, told him I wanted to write a story about his technology. We talked until 4 in the morning. He explained his vision for democratizing artificial intelligence, making it accessible for small businesses, revolutionizing how companies operate. His eyes lit up when he talked about code the way other men's eyes light up talking about sports. We started dating 3 weeks later. I watched him work 20-hour days in his garage apartment in Redwood City, surviving on ramen noodles and pure determination. I'd bring him real food, force him to sleep, edit his business proposals. When he finally got his first angel investment of $500,000, he proposed to me with a ring he'd bought from a pawn shop, promising he'd upgrade it someday when he made it big. I told him I didn't need an upgrade. I just needed him. Those early years were hard but beautiful. We got married at City Hall with just his mother Barbara and my sister Jennifer as witnesses. Our honeymoon was a weekend camping trip to Big Sur, because that's all we could afford. Marcus worked constantly, and I supported us with my journalism salary while he built his company. There were nights he'd come home defeated, ready to give up, and I'd remind him why he started. When he landed his first major contract with Google, everything changed. Suddenly we had money. Real money. We bought our first house in Palo Alto, had Emma, then Ethan. The company grew exponentially. By our 5th anniversary, Marcus was on the cover of Forbes. By our 10th, he was worth over $1 billion. Through it all, he maintained his fishing trips to Alaska. It started as a college tradition with his roommate Danny, who died in a car accident right after graduation. Marcus said these trips were his way of honoring Danny's memory, resetting his mind, staying grounded. 3 times a year, like clockwork, he'd disappear into the Alaskan wilderness for 5 days. No phones, no emails, just him and nature. I never questioned it. Why would I? He always came back refreshed, more focused, a better husband and father. He'd show me photos of massive salmon he'd caught, tell stories about eagles and bears, bring back fresh fish for Maria to prepare for a family feast. But 6 months ago, things started to change. The fishing trips extended from 5 days to a week, then 10 days, then 2 weeks. He said the company was more stressful, he needed more time to decompress. I understood, or thought I did. Running a $3 billion company couldn't be easy. Then came the late-night phone calls. Marcus had always been transparent about his communications, leaving his phone around the house, sharing passwords freely. Suddenly he was taking calls in his home office with the door locked. When I'd ask about them, he'd say it was about a sensitive acquisition, nothing to worry about. He changed all his passwords. When I questioned it, he cited security concerns, said the company's cybersecurity team insisted on it. It made sense, but it still felt wrong. We'd shared everything for 12 years, and suddenly there were walls. The biggest change was Cassandra. Marcus hired her as his executive assistant 6 months ago, right when the strange behavior started. 28 years old, Harvard MBA legs that went on for days, and a smile that could melt steel. She was brilliant, Marcus assured me, the best assistant he'd ever had. She was handling special projects that required discretion. I told myself I wasn't the jealous type. I was secure in my marriage and myself. But when Cassandra started traveling with Marcus on business trips, when she'd call the house at odd hours about urgent matters, when I'd catch them in intense conversations that would stop the moment I walked in, the doubt crept in. My mother-in-law, Barbara, never one to mince words, pulled me aside at a family dinner. She'd had 3 glasses of wine, just enough to loosen her tongue. She looked at me with those sharp blue eyes that Marcus had inherited and said something that haunted me. Rich men always have secrets, Patricia. The question is whether you can live with them. I thought about those words constantly. What secrets could Marcus have? Was it just an affair with Cassandra? As painful as that would be, I could almost understand it. We'd been married 12 years, had 2 kids. The passion had naturally cooled. Maybe he needed excitement youth, someone who looked at him like he hung the moon the way I used to. But my gut told me it was something more. The moment that changed everything came on a quiet Tuesday evening. The kids were asleep, Maria had gone home, and I was sitting in our living room looking through old photo albums. There was our wedding photo, Marcus in his rented tux, me in a simple white dress from Nordstrom Rack, both of us grinning like we'd won the lottery. There were photos from our Big Sur honeymoon, Marcus pointing at a whale in the distance. Emma's first birthday, Ethan's first steps, family vacations to Hawaii, and Italy and Japan. I found myself crying not from sadness, but from a deep longing for what we used to be. When had we stopped being partners? When had we become polite strangers living in the same beautiful house? I decided to check our shared calendar to see when Marcus would be back from his current Alaska trip. That's when I noticed something odd. The calendar showed him returning in 3 days, but when I checked his original itinerary email to the family, it said 5 days. He'd shortened his trip without telling anyone. Curious, I went to his home office. Marcus was meticulous about filing, and he kept physical copies of all his travel documents in a locked cabinet. I knew where he hid the key, behind a framed photo of Danny on his bookshelf. I'd never snooped before, never felt the need to, but something pulled me forward. Inside the cabinet, I found the expected files for his fishing trips, but also something else. A folder marked Private Property Documentation. Inside was a deed for a cabin on Kodiak Island, Alaska, purchased 6 months ago. 6 months ago, exactly when the strange behavior started. Marcus had bought property in Alaska and never told me. I sat at his desk, my hands shaking. Why would he need a secret cabin? The fishing lodge he'd been going to for years was perfectly nice. I'd seen photos, looked it up online. Glacier Bay Fishing Lodge was a 5-star resort that catered to wealthy outdoorsmen. Then I found something else. A receipt from a jewelry store in Anchorage. $3,000 for a diamond necklace purchased 2 months ago. My birthday had passed without any necklace. So had our anniversary. Mother's Day came with flowers and a spa certificate, but no jewelry. The room spun. I gripped the desk to steady myself. This was it, the proof of the affair I'd been dreading but expecting. Cassandra was probably wearing that necklace right now, laughing at the stupid wife who stayed home with the kids while she enjoyed romantic Alaskan getaways with my husband. But I wasn't the kind of woman who would sit and cry about it. I wasn't going to wait for Marcus to come home and confront him with tears and accusations. I was going to Alaska. I was going to see for myself what my husband was really doing on these fishing trips. I called Dorothy, our backup babysitter, a retired teacher who lived 2 blocks away. I told her I had a family emergency and needed her to stay with the kids for a few days. She agreed immediately. Bless her heart, didn't even ask questions. I wrote a note for Emma and Ethan saying Mommy had to help Aunt Jennifer with something important, that I'd be back soon with presents. At 1 in the morning, I booked a first-class ticket to Anchorage on the 6 a.m. flight. I packed warm clothes, my camera with the good zoom lens, and a fully charged portable charger for my phone. I transferred $10,000 to my personal checking account money from my foundation that I'd pay back later. If I was going to catch my husband cheating, I wanted to be prepared for anything. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in our kitchen drinking coffee and planning. I'd rent a car in Anchorage Drive to Glacier Bay Fishing Lodge, surprise Marcus there. If he wasn't at the lodge, I'd figure out how to get to that cabin on Kodiak Island. I Googled it, found it was accessible only by boat or float plane. Fine. I'd hire whatever I needed to hire. The Uber to San Francisco International Airport arrived at 4:30. As we pulled away from my perfect house with its perfect gardens and perfect view, I wondered if I'd ever come back to it the same person. Something told me I wouldn't. The flight to Anchorage took 6 hours. 6 hours to think about 12 years of marriage, of building a life with someone, of trusting them completely. The businessman next to me tried to make conversation, but I put on my headphones and stared out the window at the clouds below. Somewhere down there, my life was continuing without me. Emma and Ethan would wake up to Dorothy's pancakes. Maria would arrive to find my note saying I'd be gone for a few days. The foundation board would wonder why I missed the meeting. None of it mattered. What mattered was the truth. I thought about all the times Marcus had come back from these trips, how he'd smell like pine and sea salt, his face tanned and relaxed, how he'd make love to me with renewed passion like he'd missed me desperately. Was that guilt? Was he comparing me to her, finding me lacking? At 35, after 2 kids, I didn't have Cassandra's 28-year-old body. I had stretch marks and soft spots, crow's feet and gray hairs. I colored every 6 weeks. But I also had 12 years of history. I'd held Marcus when his father died of cancer 5 years ago. I'd celebrated with him when his company went public. I'd given him 2 beautiful children who had his brilliant mind and his stubborn streak. Didn't that count for something? The plane began its descent into Anchorage. Below, I could see snow-capped mountains and dark forests stretching endlessly. Alaska was beautiful and wild, so different from the manicured perfection of Silicon Valley. I understood why Marcus loved it here. What I didn't understand was why he needed to keep secrets here. Anchorage was colder than I expected for late September. The airport was small, efficient, filled with tourists in expensive outdoor gear and locals in practical fleece. I rented a Toyota 4Runner from Hertz, the clerk barely looking up from her computer as she processed my credit card. Within an hour of landing, I was on the Seward Highway heading toward Glacier Bay Fishing Lodge. The drive took 4 hours through some of the most spectacular scenery I'd ever seen. Mountains rose directly from the sea, their peaks disappearing into low clouds. Eagles circled overhead. I passed signs warning about moose and bear crossings. Any other time I would have stopped to take photos to appreciate the raw beauty of this place. But I was on a mission. Glacier Bay Fishing Lodge sat at the end of a winding dirt road 20 miles from the nearest town. It was exactly as advertised, a luxury resort designed to look rustic. Log cabins with river rock chimneys, a main lodge with soaring windows overlooking the bay, boats lined up at a private dock. The parking lot had a handful of expensive vehicles, Range Rovers and Mercedes G-Wagons, that looked absurdly out of place in the wilderness. I didn't see Marcus's rental car, the black Suburban he always got from the same company in Anchorage. The lobby was all taxidermied animals and leather furniture, a massive fireplace crackling despite the early afternoon hour. The desk clerk, a weathered man named Ted with kind eyes and calloused hands, smiled when I approached. "Welcome to Glacier Bay," he said. Checking in, "I'm actually looking for my husband," I said, trying to keep my voice casual. "Marcus Thompson. He should have checked in 4 days ago." Ted frowned, typed something into his computer. "I don't show any Thompson registered this week. You sure he's staying with us?" My stomach dropped. "He's been coming here 3 times a year for 12 years. Always books the same cabin, number 7. Ted's frown deepened. "Ma'am, I've been working here for 15 years. I know all our regular guests. I've never had a Marcus Thompson." The room tilted. I gripped the counter to steady myself. "That's impossible. I've seen photos. He brings back fish with your lodge's logo on the cooler." Ted looked at me with something like pity. "Those coolers are for sale in our gift shop, ma'am. Anyone can buy them." I stumbled backward, my mind racing. 12 years. 12 years of fishing trips to a lodge he'd never actually visited. Where had he been going? What had he been doing? "Wait," I said, remembering the receipt I'd found. "He owns a cabin on Kodiak Island." "Do you know how I could get there?" Ted whistled low. "Kodiak's a good ways from here, ma'am. You'd need to get back to Anchorage, catch a flight to Kodiak City, then figure out transportation to wherever this cabin is. Some parts of that island are pretty remote, only accessible by boat or float plane." I pulled out my phone, showed him the property deed with the GPS coordinates. Ted studied it, then shook his head. "That's way out there, middle of nowhere. You'd definitely need a float plane. I know a guy in Kodiak City who might help if the weather cooperates. But ma'am, if you don't mind me saying, heading out to a remote cabin alone might not be the safest idea." I wanted to laugh. Safety was the last thing on my mind. I thanked Ted, bought a Glacier Bay Fishing Lodge cooler from the gift shop out of spite, and headed back to my rental car. The drive back to Anchorage felt like a fever dream. My husband had been lying to me for our entire marriage. Not just recently, not just since Cassandra arrived, but from the very beginning. I called Kevin from the car. Kevin had been Marcus's assistant before Cassandra, a sweet gay man who'd left 6 months ago for a job at Apple. He'd always been fond of me, said I was the only tech wife who remembered his birthday, and asked about his husband. Patricia Kevin sounded surprised. "Is everything okay, Kevin? I need you to tell me the truth about something, and I need you to know that whatever you say won't get back to Marcus." There was a pause. "Okay," he said slowly. "The Alaska fishing trips. Did Marcus ever actually talk to you about them? Did you ever book his travel?" Another pause, longer this time. "Patricia, Look, it wasn't my place to say anything. Kevin, please." He sighed. He never talked about fishing. The Alaska trips were always marked as confidential in his calendar. Cassandra handles them now, but when I was there, he booked everything himself. I always thought it was weird, but Marcus was a good boss, and everyone's entitled to privacy. Did he ever mention a cabin on Kodiak Island? Or a project there? Kevin's voice dropped to almost a whisper. About 2 months ago, right before I left, I overheard him on a call. He mentioned Kodiak Island and something about everything being ready for the next phase. I assumed it was some kind of corporate retreat location for the company. But Patricia, there was something else. Cassandra was in his office a lot those last few weeks, and not just for work. The way they looked at each other, I'm sorry. I thanked Kevin and hung up. So it was an affair, but more than that. A secret project on a secret island with a secret cabin. My husband was living an entire double life. By the time I got back to Anchorage, it was evening. I found a small airline that flew to Kodiak Island and booked the first flight out in the morning. I checked into an airport hotel, ordered room service. I couldn't eat and lay on the bed staring at the ceiling. I thought about calling Marcus, confronting him over the phone. But I needed to see his face. I needed to look him in the eyes when I asked him why. Why the lies? Why the elaborate deception? Was our entire life together just another lie? I must have dozed off because I woke to my phone ringing. It was Emma calling to say goodnight. Her sweet voice nearly broke me. "Mommy, when are you coming home? Dorothy makes weird pancakes." "Soon, baby." Be good for Dorothy, okay? Take care of your brother. I love you, Mommy. I love you too, sweetheart. More than all the stars. After she hung up, I cried for the first time since finding those receipts. I cried for my children who thought their father was a hero. I cried for the woman I'd been this morning who thought she just had a wandering husband. I cried for the 12 years I'd spent building a life on a foundation of lies. Tomorrow, I'd fly to Kodiak Island. Tomorrow, I'd find that cabin. Tomorrow, I'd discover who my husband really was. The flight to Kodiak Island took 90 minutes in a small prop plane that shook with every gust of wind. Only 12 passengers, mostly locals, and a few hunters with expensive gear. The pilot, a woman named Margaret with steel gray hair and steady hands, announced that weather was coming in might be grounded for a few days if we weren't careful. Kodiak City was smaller than I expected, a fishing town with one main street and buildings that looked like they'd been there since the gold rush. I found Joe's air service at the tiny airport, a one-man operation run out of a trailer. Joe himself was exactly what you'd expect a Vietnam vet with a face like worn leather and eyes that had seen everything. I showed him the GPS coordinates. I need to get here today. Joe studied the coordinates, then looked at me over his reading glasses. That's Williams Bay area. Nothing out there but wilderness and bears. Biggest bears in the world on Kodiak. Why would a lady like you want to go there? My husband owns a cabin there. I'm surprising him. Joe's expression said he wasn't buying it, but money talks. I offered him $2,000 in cash for a round trip, told him to wait while I visited the cabin. He agreed, but not without warnings. Weather's turning bad, he said. We've got maybe a 3-hour window. If we're not back before that storm hits, we're stuck wherever we are until it passes. Could be days. I didn't care. I was too close to turn back now. The float plane was smaller than the prop plane, just 4 seats, including the pilot's. Joe handed me a headset so we could communicate over the engine noise. As we lifted off from the harbor, Kodiak City disappeared, quickly replaced by endless wilderness. Mountains, forests, rivers cutting through valleys like veins. No roads, no power lines, no signs of civilization. 40 minutes into the flight, Joe pointed ahead. There, he said. Williams Bay. I could see it, a protected cove with black sand beaches and towering spruce trees. And there, on a small peninsula jutting into the bay, was a cabin. But calling it a cabin was like calling a mansion a house. It was massive, all glass and steel and modern architecture, completely out of place in the wilderness. A dock extended into the bay with 2 boats moored. Solar panels covered the roof. A helicopter pad sat to one side. This was no fishing retreat. This was a compound. That's some cabin, Joe said. Your husband must do pretty well. He's in tech, I said weakly, my mind reeling at what I was seeing. Joe circled once, looking for the best place to land. I could see vehicles parked near the cabin, 4 of them, including a black Suburban. Marcus was here. But he wasn't alone. As Joe brought the plane down onto the water, I could see figures on the dock. 3 men, maybe 4. None of them looked like they were here to fish. They looked like they were here for business. Ma'am, Joe said, I don't like the look of this. You sure you want me to leave you here? I'll be fine. My husband's expecting me. I lied. Just wait at the north end of the bay. I'll text you when I'm ready to leave. Joe didn't look convinced, but he taxied to the dock. One of the men caught the rope he threw, tied off the plane. I climbed out, my legs shaking. The men stared at me, clearly surprised. I didn't recognize any of them. I walked up the dock toward the cabin, my heart pounding. Through the massive windows, I could see more people inside. And there, standing at what looked like a conference table, was Marcus. He was pointing at something on a laptop screen, gesticulating the way he did when he was excited about an idea. Beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched, was Cassandra. I circled the cabin, staying in the tree line. There was another entrance on the back side, sliding glass doors that opened onto a deck. I could hear voices now, carried on the wind. Marcus's laugh, the one I'd fallen in love with 12 years ago. Other voices, male and female, speaking in English, and what sounded like Russian. I crept closer, using the thick trees as cover. Through the glass doors, I could see the full scene. 8 people total, including Marcus and Cassandra. Laptops everywhere, documents spread across the table, multiple monitors showing what looked like financial data. This wasn't a romantic getaway. This was a business meeting. But why here? Why the secrecy? Then I heard Marcus speak, his voice clear through an open window. The shell companies are all set up in the Caymans, he was saying. We can move 200 million through them this quarter without triggering any alerts. The AI technology transfer will look like a legitimate licensing deal. My blood went cold. Shell companies. Moving hundreds of millions. This wasn't just an affair. This was financial crime. Cassandra spoke next, her voice all business. The Moscow buyers are ready. They want the military applications package by end of month. Are we sure the Pentagon won't trace it back? Marcus laughed. They don't even know we have it. The beautiful thing about AI is that you can develop military applications while claiming you're working on customer service bots. By the time anyone figures it out, we'll be untouchable. $800 million untouchable. I couldn't breathe. My husband was selling military technology to Moscow. Treason. He was committing treason. I pulled out my phone, started recording video through the window. My hands shook so badly I could barely hold it steady. I caught Marcus pulling up more documents on his laptop, heard him mention specific technologies, specific buyers, specific dates. Evidence. I was gathering evidence. That's when I heard the crunch of footsteps on gravel behind me. I turned to find one of the men from the dock standing 3 feet away. He was massive, 6'4" at least, with the kind of muscles that came from violence, not the gym. His hand was inside his jacket, and I knew without seeing it that he was touching a gun. "You're not supposed to be here," he said in accented English. "I'm Marcus's wife," I said, trying to sound confident. I came to surprise him. The man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Let's go inside and surprise him together." He grabbed my arm, his grip like a vice. I had no choice but to let him march me around to the front door. He opened it without knocking, pushed me inside. The conversation stopped immediately. 8 pairs of eyes turned to stare at me. Marcus went white. "Patricia." "What? How did you—" "Surprise, honey," I said. "Thought I'd see what these fishing trips were really about. Turns out the fish you've been catching are pretty big. $800 million big." The room went silent. Cassandra moved closer to Marcus, her hand going to his arm. The other men shifted, and I realized they were all armed, all dangerous, all wondering if I was about to become a problem that needed solving. Marcus recovered quickly, his CEO mask sliding into place. "Gentlemen, could you give me a moment with my wife?" The men filed out onto the deck, but not far. Cassandra stayed, and Marcus didn't ask her to leave. That told me everything. How long, I asked. How long what Marcus said, his voice cold, now the voice he used for firing people. "How long have you been a traitor? How long have you been lying to me? How long have you been sleeping with her?" Cassandra laughed, a tinkling sound like breaking glass. "Oh, honey, I'm not sleeping with your husband. I'm his business partner. The Russians pay very well for American military technology. Your husband's just smart enough to profit from it." "Shut up," Cassandra Marcus snapped. Then to me, "You shouldn't be here, Patricia. You should be home with the kids, living your perfect life, running your little charity. That's what you're good at." This gesturing around the room. "This is what I'm good at. Committing treason, making money, real money, the kind that sets up our children and their children. You think $3 billion is enough? It's nothing compared to what's possible. The Russians, the Chinese, they'll pay anything for what I can provide. And the beauty is, the technology exists in such a gray area that by the time laws catch up, we'll be untouchable." I laughed bitterly. "There is no we, Marcus. There never was there? I was just the cover story. The wife and kids to make you look respectable while you built your criminal empire." Marcus stepped closer, and for the first time in 12 years, I was afraid of him. "You're being dramatic, Patricia. You're upset, I understand. But you need to think about this logically. You can walk away now, go home, and nothing changes. You keep your perfect life, the house, the money, the status. Or you can make this difficult, and things will get very unpleasant for you. Are you threatening me? I'm explaining reality to you. You think anyone will believe you, the hysterical wife who followed her husband to Alaska. I have the best lawyers money can buy. I'll paint you as unstable paranoid, maybe suffering from a breakdown. I'll get the kids Patricia. Full custody. You'll be lucky to get supervised visits. My phone was still recording in my pocket. I needed more time, needed him to keep talking. You bastard. 12 years, Marcus. I supported you when you had nothing. And I'm grateful for that. Truly. But that was a different life. I'm not that garage startup guy anymore. I haven't been for years. You just refused to see it. So all those fishing trips, business meetings, planning sessions, technology transfers. The cabin's been operational for 6 months, but I've been building this network for 5 years. Every trip to Alaska was about this, not some dead college roommate. Danny's not even dead, is he? Marcus shrugged. Danny lives in Portland, runs a coffee shop. I paid him $50,000 to never contact you if you ever looked him up. Every word was another knife in my heart. But I kept him talking, kept recording. The Pentagon technology. How did you even get it? Marcus's ego couldn't resist explaining. We developed it under a defense contract. Officially, we only delivered a basic algorithm. Unofficially, we kept developing. What we have now is 10 years ahead of anything the Pentagon knows about. Autonomous weapon systems, predictive battlefield AI, cyber warfare capabilities that could shut down entire countries. The Russians are paying $800 million for just a portion of it. And Cassandra was NSA before I recruited her. She knows exactly how to move this technology without triggering alerts. She's brilliant, actually. Harvard Law, MIT Computer Science, speaks 4 languages. Everything you're not. Patricia. That stung, but I pushed through. What about the others? Your co-conspirators out there. Private military contractors, intelligence assets, people who understand that borders are just lines on maps, and money is the only real power. They're facilitating the transfers, providing security, ensuring our buyers are legitimate. I felt sick. This was bigger than just Marcus. This was a whole network of traitors. How can you do this? I asked. Betray your country. Risk your children's future. Marcus laughed, a sound I'd once loved that now made my skin crawl. I'm securing their future. With what I'm making, they'll never have to work. They can live anywhere in the world, be anyone they want to be. That's true freedom, Patricia, not your middle-class morality. I stood up, started backing toward the door. I'm leaving. No, Marcus said, you're not. He nodded to Cassandra, who pulled out a phone and typed something. Within seconds, the men from outside filed back in, blocking the exits. You're going to stay here until we figure out what to do with you, Marcus said. Can't have you running to the authorities with your wild stories. Though honestly, who would believe you? Your word against mine, and I have 8 witnesses who will swear you never heard anything incriminating. The man who'd found me outside, the one with the gun, stepped forward. Where should we put her? The storage room for now, Marcus said. Not even looking at me. Make sure she's comfortable. She's still my wife, after all. For now, Cassandra added with a smile. The storage room was actually a finished basement, windowless but clean, with a cot, a bathroom, and shelves full of emergency supplies. They took my phone, my car keys, my wallet. The man with the gun, who told me his name was Victor, wasn't cruel, just professional. He brought me water, a sandwich, a blanket. He told me Marcus would figure things out, that I shouldn't worry. But I wasn't worried. I was planning. Before they'd taken my phone, I'd managed to do 3 things. First, I'd stopped the recording and saved it to the cloud. Second, I'd shared it with Jennifer, my sister, with a message saying if anything happened to me, take this to the FBI. Third, I'd sent the GPS coordinates to Joe with a text saying emergency contact authorities. I didn't know if the messages had gone through before they took the phone, but I had to hope. I sat on the cot thinking. Marcus thought he knew me. The charity wife, the society lady who organized galas and looked pretty in photos. He'd forgotten that I'd been an investigative journalist, that I'd broken stories about corporate corruption, that I'd won awards for my work before I'd given it up to support his dreams. He'd also forgotten that I'd been the one who'd helped him build his company. I knew his passwords, not the new ones, but the old ones, the ones he used for backup systems. Marcus was brilliant but lazy about security. He reused variations of the same passwords. If he'd changed them to Marcus 2023, secure the old one was probably Marcus 2018, secure or something similar. But first I needed to get out of this room. Victor sat outside the door. I could hear him shifting occasionally, probably playing on his phone. The room had no windows, but it did have a ventilation grate near the ceiling. Too small for me to fit through, but I could see pipes running behind it. Old pipes, probably original to the cabin's construction before Marcus's renovation. I stood on a box, examined the pipes closely. One was marked hot water supply. It ran along the ceiling and disappeared through the wall, probably feeding the upstairs bathrooms and kitchen. If I could break that pipe flood the basement, they'd have to move me. I found a wrench on one of the emergency supply shelves. Marcus, always prepared for disasters, had inadvertently given me the tools I needed. I climbed back up, reached through the grate, and started loosening the pipe fitting. It took 30 minutes of careful work, but finally I felt it give. Water started spraying, just a trickle at first, then a steady stream. I loosened it more until water was pouring into the room. Then I started screaming. "Help, the room's flooding, Wes." Victor burst in, saw the water already ankle-deep and rising. He cursed in Russian, grabbed my arm, and pulled me out of the room. He dragged me upstairs, yelling for help. In the chaos, I saw my chance. Everyone was running around trying to figure out how to shut off the water. Marcus was yelling at someone on the phone, probably a plumber in Kodiak City, who couldn't possibly get here in time. I slipped into Marcus's makeshift office, a bedroom he'd converted with all his tech equipment. His laptop was there, still logged in. Sloppy Marcus. Very sloppy. I plugged in a thumb drive from his desk, started copying files. Financial records, emails, documents about the technology transfers. The progress bar seemed to crawl. 50%. 60. 70. Patricia. I spun to find Cassandra in the doorway. She lunged for the laptop, but I was closer. I grabbed it, yanked out the thumb drive, and threw the laptop through the window. Glass shattered the laptop, disappearing into the darkness outside. "You bitch!" Cassandra screamed, tackling me. We hit the floor hard. She was younger, stronger, but I was angrier. 12 years of lies gave me strength I didn't know I had. We rolled, punching, scratching, pulling hair like teenagers. I managed to knee her in the stomach, pushing her off me. I scrambled to my feet, the thumb drive clutched in my hand. More men were coming down the hallway, drawn by the noise. I did the only thing I could think of. I ran to the broken window and jumped. It was only a one-story drop, but I landed hard on my ankle. Pain shot up my leg, but I forced myself to move. The forest was 20 feet away. If I could make it to the trees, I'd have a chance. I ran, limping, hearing shouts behind me. The thumb drive went into my bra, the only place I could think to hide it. Tree branches tore at my clothes, my face. I stumbled over roots, splashed through a stream, kept moving deeper into the forest. Behind me, flashlights bobbed through the trees. Victor's voice, calm and professional, directing the search. They were hunters, and I was prey. But I had one advantage. They needed me alive. Marcus couldn't kill me without raising questions, not when people knew I'd come to Alaska. I found a fallen tree, massive and hollow from rot. I crawled inside, pulling leaves and branches over the entrance. My ankle throbbed. My face stung from scratches. My clothes were soaked from the stream. But I was hidden for now. I heard them pass twice, so close I could have reached out and touched their boots. Victor said something about checking the beach, that I might try to signal a boat. They moved away, their voices fading. I waited another hour before crawling out. The moon was full, giving just enough light to navigate. I remembered Joe saying he'd wait at the north end of the bay. That was maybe 2 miles through the forest. With my ankle, it would take hours, but I had to try. Every step was agony. Every sound made me freeze, listening for pursuit. An owl hooted, making me jump. Something large moved through the underbrush, and I remembered Joe's warning about bears. The biggest bears in the world lived on Kodiak Island. But bears seemed less dangerous than the men hunting me. It took 3 hours to reach the north end of the bay. 3 hours of pain, fear, and determination. When I finally saw the float plane bobbing in the water, I almost cried. Joe was asleep in the pilot's seat, but he woke when I pounded on the door. "Jesus Christ," he said, "seeing my condition, what happened? We need to leave. Now." Joe didn't argue. He started the engine while I climbed in, and we were in the air within minutes. As we rose, I looked back at the cabin. Lights blazed from every window. Tiny figures ran along the beach. They'd figured out where I'd gone, but they were too late. "We need to go to the police," Joe said. "FBI," I corrected. "This is federal." Joe radioed ahead. By the time we landed in Kodiak City, FBI agents were waiting. They'd already received Jennifer's package, my recorded evidence. They'd been mobilizing, planning a raid when I'd escaped on my own. I handed over the thumb drive, told them everything. Within hours, a full tactical team was heading to the cabin. But Marcus and the others were already gone. The cabin was empty except for water damage and broken glass. Somehow they'd been tipped off. But they couldn't run from the evidence I'd gathered. The FBI had enough to issue warrants, freeze accounts, start a massive investigation. Marcus's empire began to crumble within days. The next 6 months were a whirlwind of FBI interviews, grand jury testimonies, and media attention. The story broke nationally, then internationally. Tech billionaire accused of selling military secrets to Russia. Every news outlet wanted an exclusive with the wife who'd exposed him. Marcus was arrested 2 weeks after Alaska caught trying to flee to a non-extradition country. Cassandra was picked up at JFK with a fake passport. The other conspirators fell one by one, a network of greed and treason unraveling. The trial was brutal. Marcus's lawyers tried everything to discredit me. They painted me as a vindictive wife jealous of Cassandra, making up wild stories for revenge. They claimed the recording was edited, taken out of context. They suggested I was having a mental breakdown. But the evidence was overwhelming. The FBI had used my recording and the thumb drive files to uncover a massive trail of financial crimes and technology theft. Other witnesses came forward, employees who'd suspected something was wrong, but had been too afraid to speak up. The jury took just 3 hours to convict on all charges. Marcus got 40 years in federal prison. No possibility of parole. Cassandra got 25. The others received various sentences, the lightest being 10 years. The Russian buyers were sanctioned, their assets frozen. The military technology was recovered before it could be fully transferred. I sat in the courtroom when they read the verdict, looking at the man I'd loved for 12 years. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Even then, facing 4 decades in prison, he couldn't show remorse. He was still calculating, still looking for an angle, still believing he was the smartest person in the room. The divorce was straightforward after the conviction. I got full custody of Emma and Ethan, the house, and half of Marcus's legitimate assets. The other half went to the government as restitution. $3 billion became $1.5 billion then, after taxes and legal fees, about $800 million. Still more money than I'd ever dreamed of, but it felt like blood money. I sold the Silicon Valley mansion immediately. We moved to a normal house in Marin County, 4 bedrooms, a pool, a view of Mount Tamalpais. Nice, but not ostentatious. The kids adjusted better than I'd expected. Their expensive private school friends disappeared, but they made new ones at the local public school kids, who liked them for who they were, not who their father was. Emma struggled the most. At 10, she understood enough to feel betrayed. She'd idolized her father, wanted to be a tech CEO just like him. Now she wanted nothing to do with technology. She threw herself into music, her violin becoming her voice for emotions she couldn't express. Ethan at 8 understood less, but felt more. He had nightmares wet. The bed clung to me like he was afraid I'd disappear too. We did therapy twice a week, all 3 of us learning to process the trauma, to rebuild trust, to believe in good again. 6 months after the trial, I started the Phoenix Foundation, a nonprofit supporting women who discovered their spouses were involved in criminal activities. Women who'd lost everything not to divorce but to asset forfeiture, legal fees, social ostracism. Women who'd done the right thing and paid the price for it. The foundation took off. Within a year, we were helping hundreds of women rebuild their lives. We provided legal aid therapy, job training, safe housing. We created a network of survivors who understood each other's unique trauma. I found purpose in the pain. I also wrote a book, The Fisherman's Wife, a true story of betrayal and courage. It topped the bestseller lists for 16 weeks. Hollywood wanted to make a movie, but I wasn't ready for that. Maybe someday, but not yet. The money from the book went into trust funds for Emma and Ethan. Not Marcus's dirty money, but clean money earned from my own story, my own strength. A year after everything, I met David. He was a widower teaching history at the local high school where Emma would eventually go. His wife had died of cancer 3 years earlier. He had a daughter, Lucy, the same age as Ethan. We met at a school fundraiser, bonding over single parenthood and starting over. David knew who I was, everyone did, but he didn't care about the money or the notoriety. He cared that I made him laugh, that I understood loss, that I was trying to raise good kids in a complicated world. We took it slow, dinners here and there, family hikes on weekends, gradually blending our lives. He proposed 2 years later on Mount Tamalpais. No fancy ring, no big production, just a simple question and a promise to love me and my children for who we were, not what we'd been through. I said yes. Marcus wrote me a letter from prison right before my wedding to David. I almost threw it away unopened, but curiosity won. Patricia, I heard you're remarrying. A school teacher. How perfectly modest of you. I want you to know that I don't forgive you. You destroyed everything I built, everything I was. You could have looked the other way. Lived your comfortable life, but you chose to be the hero. I hope you're happy with your small life, your small man, your small dreams. You'll never have what we could have had. Power. Real power. The kind that shapes the world. But you were always too small to understand that. Marcus. I read it twice, then burned it in the fireplace. His words had no power over me anymore. He still didn't understand that what he'd called small was actually everything. Love, trust, integrity, family. The things that actually mattered. The things he'd traded for money and power and a prison cell. It's been 5 years now since that night in Alaska. 5 years since I discovered my husband was a traitor. 5 years since my world shattered and reformed into something stronger. Emma is 15, brilliant and passionate, first chair violin in the State Youth Orchestra. She wants to be a human rights lawyer now, to fight for justice in her own way. She still has complicated feelings about her father, but she's learning to separate the dad she loved from the criminal he became. Ethan is 13, kind and curious, obsessed with marine biology. He wants to protect the oceans, to save the whales, to make the world better. He barely remembers Marcus now. David is dad in every way that matters. Lucy. My stepdaughter is part of our family seamlessly. She and Ethan are like twins, inseparable. She calls me Mom, not because she's forgotten her birth mother, but because there's room in her heart for both of us. David and I had a daughter together 2 years ago. Hope. When people ask about her name, I tell them it's because she represents the future, the proof that beautiful things can grow from broken soil. The Phoenix Foundation has helped over 1,000 women now. We've expanded to 5 cities with plans for more. I speak at conferences about financial crimes, about the warning signs, about the importance of trusting your instincts. I tell my story over and over, each time a little easier, each time reaching someone who needs to hear it. Marcus is still in prison. He'll be 78 when he gets out, if he lives that long. I don't visit, don't write, don't think about him, except when the kids ask questions. He's their history, but not their future. Sometimes on quiet mornings when the fog rolls over Mount Tamalpais, I think about that woman I was. The one who had everything and nothing at the same time. The one who suspected but didn't want to know. the one who finally found the courage to look for the truth, even though it cost her everything she thought she wanted. I want to tell her that it gets better, that losing a life built on lies is actually finding a life built on truth, that the pain is temporary, but the freedom is forever. I want to tell her that one day she'll sit on a different deck watching a different view surrounded by people who love her for exactly who she is, that her children will grow up strong and good despite everything, that she'll find love again deeper and truer because she knows what false love looks like. I want to tell her that jumping through that window in Alaska wasn't falling, it was flying. The other day I was at the grocery store when I ran into one of the tech wives from my old life, Veronica, whose husband runs a social media company. She looked at my simple clothes, my practical car in the parking lot, my normal life, and I could see the pity in her eyes. "Patricia," she said, "I'm so sorry about everything. It must be so hard losing all that." I smiled genuinely. "I didn't lose anything, Veronica. I found everything." She didn't understand, but that's okay. You can't understand until you've been there, until you've stood at the crossroads between comfortable lies and uncomfortable truths and chosen the harder path. The Phoenix Foundation gets emails every day from women who are standing at those crossroads. Women who found receipts that don't make sense, passwords that have suddenly changed husbands who aren't where they say they are. I tell them all the same thing. Trust your instincts. Seek the truth. Be prepared for it to hurt. But know that on the other side of that hurt is freedom. Marcus was wrong about me being small. There's nothing small about choosing integrity over comfort. Nothing small about protecting your children from a legacy of lies. Nothing small about rebuilding your entire life from scratch at 35. He thought power came from money, from secrets, from being willing to sell anything to anyone. But real power comes from being able to look at yourself in the mirror without flinching. Real power comes from your children being proud of who you are. Real power comes from sleeping peacefully because your conscience is clear. Last week, the FBI called. They'd uncovered another piece of Marcus's network, another technology transfer that had been in progress when he was arrested. My testimony would be needed again. I agreed without hesitation. David held my hand as I told him about the call. "We don't need you to do this," he said. "We're safe now, happy. You could say no. But that's exactly why I have to say yes," I told him. "Because we're safe and happy and other families aren't. Because someone needs to stand up and say this is wrong. Because I can." He kissed my forehead and said he'd watch the kids while I was gone. No questions, no complaints, just support. That's what real partnership looks like. Tomorrow, I fly to Washington, D.C. to testify again. Emma asked if I was scared. I told her the truth. No, I'm not scared anymore. Fear is what kept me from looking for the truth for so long. Fear of losing my marriage, my lifestyle, my identity. But here's what I learned in that freezing forest on Kodiak Island, running from men with guns protecting evidence that would destroy my life as I knew it. The only thing scarier than the truth is living a lie. The truth might hurt, might cost you everything you think you value. But lies cost you yourself, and that's a price too high to pay. So if you're watching this wondering about your own situation, suspicious about your own spouse, seeing red flags, but afraid to look closer, let me tell you something. You're stronger than you know. You deserve the truth, however painful. Your children deserve a parent they can be proud of. And sometimes, just sometimes, what looks like an ending is actually a beginning. That morning I went to surprise my billionaire husband on his fishing trip, changed my life forever. But not in the way you might think. Yes, I lost my marriage, my mansion, my status in Silicon Valley society. But I gained something worth so much more. I gained myself. And that frozen moment in Alaska, when I saw the truth, that wasn't the moment my life ended. That was the moment it finally began. Thank you for watching my story. If you've ever faced a moment where you had to choose between comfortable lies and difficult truths, I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. Please like this video if it resonated with you, Subscribe to hear more stories of women who found their strength in the darkest moments, and share this with anyone who might need to hear that they're not alone. Remember, your truth is your power. Don't let anyone take that away from you. Until next time, this is Patricia reminding you that sometimes the most dangerous fishing trips are the ones that catch the biggest truths. Stay strong, stay true, and always, always trust your instincts.